everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to Atari ST A to Z, a series of short playthroughs of Atari ST games, some which I grew up with, and some which are new to me. Today is one of the former. Today's game is S.T.U.N Runner. This was a 1989 arcade release by Atari Games and was later ported to Atari ST, Amiga, Commodore 64, Amstrad CPC and Spectrum, and published by Tengen and Domark, who typically partnered with Atari Games, and Tengen, who were part of Atari Games at the time. So the original arcade release of this was one of the earliest futuristic high-speed racers that you can find out there. And it made use of a modified version of Atari's polygon-based hard driving hardware, which made it pretty impressive at the time. It was one of the earliest polygonal 3D games. The home ports, they kind of attempt to replicate this to varying degrees. The 16-bit ports do a reasonable job, albeit at a fairly pitiful frame rate by modern standards. The 8-bit ports took a few more liberties, tending to operate using cycling colours and sprites rather than true polygonal 3D. There was also an Atari Lynx version in 1991 that actually formed one of the truest seeming arcade ports, despite the fact that it was based entirely on sprites rather than using any polygons at all. So that's worth checking out if you do have access to an Atari Lynx hardware. So before we go and play, let's have a look at the packaging, because I happen to have it here. So here we are, here's the lovely box. This is fairly typical for Tengen and Domark releases at the time. Some of them came in sort of hard plastic cases, but this is one that comes in a cardboard box like this. We've got the Atari ST sticker over there. Here's the back. I love this photograph in the corner. Let me just try and show that to you there. The guy sitting on the S.T.U.N Runner machine, he's having such a good time there. He's loving it. So, a stunning coin-op, now a stunning computer game. Grasp the controls and enter the awesome three-dimensional world of S.T.U.N Runner. Travel ahead in time to the 21st century. Okay. And experience the thrills of racing at speeds of over 900 miles per hour. It's challenging and exhilarating. Like a bobsled race, you can increase your speed by riding the outer walls of the tunnel, blast armored drones and mag cycles out of the way, and hit the boost pads for massive injections of speed. Jump the ramps, annihilate the opposition with shockwaves, and follow the trails of stars for bonus points. Complete the challenge screens and race through the S.T.U.N network towards the ultimate challenge. Feel the power! Yeah, so this version apparently was programmed by the Kremlin, whoever they are. I vaguely recognise that name. I can't think who they are offhand, but anyway, let's have a look inside the box. There's not actually a lot going on. We've got a single floppy disk, and we've got a fold-out manual. We've actually also got a little baggie to keep those in if you want to as well. I tend not to because it's just easier. So the manual here is a sort of fold-out affair rather than a booklet. And what we got here, it tells us that S.T.U.N stands for the Spread Tunnel Underground Network Runner. The ultimate high-speed challenge. Guide your S.T.U.N ship through a maze of twisting tunnels, avoiding obstacles and enemy craft as you blast your way through the 24 levels to the ultimate challenge. So the aim in the original arcade game of this was to get through those 24 levels, and then the ultimate challenge was a final level that kind of potentially went on forever. And the idea was that you would get to that level and then you would just simply have to survive as long as possible and get as high a score as possible. And in the original arcade version, there were sort of markers along the way showing the names of people who'd got to particular points in the ultimate challenge, and that was tracked separately from the high score table. So it was a really cool idea. Of course, it being an arcade game, the majority of people never actually got there though, so actually reaching the ultimate challenge in S.T.U.N Runner was an achievement in itself. So, what does it actually tell us in the manual? So it tells us the things we've already seen. So it says, as in a bobsleigh run, you should follow the outside curve of the tunnel wall. Once armed, use your lasers to destroy the enemy craft and follow the path of the green stars, which show you the fastest route through the tunnels. And then it gives us a bit of a breakdown of enemies. It gives us some screenshots, which, based on my prior knowledge of the Atari ST version, are actually slightly unrepresentative of what the game actually offers. I mean, it's a minor thing, but if you just look at how the tunnels are represented there, they're sort of quite smooth circles in those screenshots there, whereas they're fairly angular in the Atari ST version. I don't know if it's different on the Amiga or the PC version or anything like that, but yeah, I mean, it gets the point across, but it's not quite representative of what you get in the game. and then it's just loading instructions, and then the other side of this is in Italian. And that's a lot, basically. So, let's go play Stun Runner. Okay, here we are with Stun Runner, released by Tengen and Domark on the Atari ST. Originally an Atari Games production in the arcades. Now, this isn't by any means a particularly good arcade conversion, but it is a game I have some quite fond memories of from back in the day. The arcade version is much better. The Atari Lynx version is much better, as I mentioned in the introduction. But we'll have a look anyway, see what you could expect from an arcade conversion of this kind of game at the time. We start off with this pretty cool digitized music that I don't believe was in the original arcade version. But at some point we're going to have to leave that behind, so let's do that now. And some incredibly muffled digitized speech. So, as with a lot of Atari games from the period, you have the option of choosing where you want to begin the game. And you get a bonus according to where you start. So if you start at a later level and successfully complete it, you'll get a big score bonus, effectively allowing you to skip the earlier levels without penalty if you find them too easy or whatever. So we're going to start from the beginning for today. We'll maybe have another go and look at some of the later levels. But your ultimate goal in this game, as I said in the intro at the start, is you're trying to get through, I think it's 24 levels, and then get onto this endless ultimate challenge level. So we'll begin with Cakewalk, and this starts by teaching you the various skills that you're going to need to know in order to get through the game. So the red stars show the fastest path, drive over stars for bonus points, joystick forward back for shockwave. That's actually wrong. You have to press the spacebar for the shockwave. I think that's like a smart bomb that destroys everything in front of you. It becomes quite important later on. And as you can see up at the side there, we've got a key for the map, so we can see roughly what we can expect from this level. So the colours are a bit funny on this, aren't they? But anyway, yeah, the yellow bits, if you can see those, are the tunnels that we'll be going through, and then there's various other sections that you have on there. So I'm not sure if those colours are appearing correctly. I mean, the in-game graphics are certainly fine, but they looked a bit odd. Anyway, so here we are into the game, moving at a mighty 500 miles per hour and collecting stars. So this first level, all you need to do is just basically follow the path of stars, get as many points as you can. It's pretty easy. And it gives you a sort of quick preview of what you can expect from the rest of the game. So it alternates between those flat sections that are a bit sort of like roller coaster rides later on, and these tunnels. And there's also variations on the tunnels, like this half-pipe tunnels. We saw that briefly at the start there. There's sort of wireframe tunnels that you get as well. I can't remember if those are implemented in the ST version, but they're certainly in the arcade version. Yeah, and then your aim is very simply to get to the end of the course before the time in the bottom left expires. And in the arcade version, when you got to these ending gates here, there would be a cool pixel art background to enjoy, but there is not in this one. There we are, first level done. So now we wait, and there we go. Boost Boulevard, touch boost pads for hyperspeed, press triggers for lasers, 3 levels to challenge level 1. Now, this is a longer course, and in this one we encounter at some point, there we are, the boost pads. So the boost pads whack up your speed to a mighty 900 miles per hour. We won't comment on the not especially convincing sense of speed in this game. It's 900 miles an hour, so you should believe that. But yeah, the boost pads also make you invincible. So while you're a transparent wireframe pattern, you can just pass through any enemies without penalty as well. Otherwise, you have a certain amount of shields that determine how many hits you can take from enemies. It doesn't appear to actually show your shield value on screen anywhere. In the original arcade version, sort of bits would fall off your ship as you go through, but I'm not sure that that's implemented in the ST version here. So, when compared to the 8-bit versions of this game, this conversion here is sort of reasonably close in spirit to what the arcade version was doing, albeit at a considerably lower frame rate and speed. And obviously by modern standards, that frame rate in particular looks a little bit laughable, but back in the day, I remember quite enjoying this game. I never actually saw the original arcade version out in the wild, which is a bit of a shame, because I think I would have quite enjoyed it. But it was an early example of a futuristic racer, which was not something we'd really seen a great deal at that point. So they really sort of came into their own with games like Wipeout, F-Zero, that sort of thing. There were some PC ones as well. I think Gremlin did one called Slipstream 5000, if I remember rightly. But this was before all of those. And it was interesting because it was something a little bit different from your average racing game. So not only for the fact that it was sort of futuristic themed, but also the fact that it kind of played in proper 3D as well. And from that perspective, there was not only the fact that it was presented in polygonal graphics rather than using sprites, but also things like the tunnels where you had to, sort of, rather than just turning round corners, you had to sort of go up on the sides of the corners. And in fact, that's sort of the inverse of what you expect to do in a typical racing game of the period. So, because you play this, the gameplay of this in the tunnels a bit like a bobsleigh run, rather than steering round the corners, what you're doing in this is you're actually steering in the opposite direction to the corner so you can stay on the outside of the tunnel wall. Which you might think would be counterintuitive, but yeah, just mentioning it then was... It only really occurred to me that you're sort of doing the opposite of what you typically do in a racing game there. It's just the sort of presentation of it being in a tunnel, I guess, makes it a bit more intuitive than it might otherwise be. So those ones there, those are metallic things that you can't destroy. You can if you get a shockwave, but I always have trouble getting the shockwave to work in this game. As I said, it's a joystick up-down to do a shockwave, but that never seems to work. And the manual says spacebar, but that doesn't seem to work either. So I'm not entirely convinced you can actually do a shockwave in this version of Stun Runner. Yeah, spacebar definitely doesn't do anything. And joystick up-down doesn't appear to do anything either. So I guess we have to live without shockwaves. But yeah, this is pretty much what you can expect from Stun Runner. And as you progress, you get onto these various challenge levels, which are pretty much the same as the normal levels, to be perfectly honest. Roller coaster, look out for crazy mag cycles. Next level is challenge level 1. So let's see if we can get to one of those challenge levels and see if there's anything particularly different about them. So in this one, it's telling us to watch out for the mag cycles, which are those sort of pink enemies there. They only take a single hit to get rid of. But they move quite quickly and erratically, so you need to try and either avoid them or destroy them. And these things down in the middle, these are trains that are in several segments, so you need to shoot them several times to get rid of them. Up onto the wall, and out into the open air again. Yeah, I think I like this game because it kind of reminded me of like theme park rides and roller coasters and so on. I mean, this level is literally called Roller Coaster. But I was kind of fascinated by any sort of game that tried to sort of recreate the experience of going on a ride like a roller coaster. Like there was also a game called Roller Coaster Rumbler that I was a big fan of, where you were literally riding a roller coaster and shooting down targets. It was kind of like a, I won't say light gun shooter because you didn't use a light gun using the mouse, but yeah, it was a quite literally a rail shooter because you were on rails. You see what I did there? But yeah, I like this because it's sort of fueled some of those fantasies of going on an exciting ride and so on. And as I say, although it may look pretty pitiful by modern standards, particularly in terms of frame rate, back in the day, this is what we had. I mean, there are better examples of games that make use of 3D graphics, as we've already seen on this series. We've seen F-15 Strike Eagle 2. I mean, that was a few years later than this, but... yeah, it would perhaps be interesting to see a developer from later in the ST's life cycle, or even the modern era, take another crack at this game and see if they can actually make it run a bit better. Because I'm sure it'll be possible. I mean, there are some really quite impressive polygon-based games on the Atari ST. So, like I say, Microprose's flight simulators are some of those. Those are always pretty good in terms of speed and frame rate. There was a game by Core Design called Thunderhawk as well that I think actually pushed to 60 frames a second or so. I remember that was actually a big selling point at the time, is how smooth it ran. But anyway, we're getting a bit off topic. We're on to our first challenge level now. The Boost Challenge. Goal, hit as many boost pads as possible. Alright, let's do it. So down in the bottom right of the screen, you can see that there's a record of what you've achieved in this particular level, and also what the best score in this particular level as well. So it's not just a high score. It also keeps track of how many boost pads you've hit, how many stars you've collected, how many enemies you've destroyed, and it keeps track of all of those separately. So there's an interesting amount of incentive to improve, not just in terms of score and time, as in most racing games, but also in terms of actually hitting these other objects as well. I'm not doing too well on that front in the minute. I'm missing most of these. The collision detection is a little bit wonky in this at times as well. You might have noticed a couple of times where I look like I've been hitting the wall when I'm clearly not. And I think the reason for that is the sort of calculations for the collision detection are almost getting ahead of the screen update. So, like, the actual program thinks I'm further along the track than the actual screen display is reflecting, which is a bit of an issue. But I mean, again, in this era, when you were talking this style of 3D graphics, you pretty much took what you could get. Oh, I'm missing everything. Yeah, I forget whether this was particularly well received or not. I have a feeling that it wasn't. I have a feeling that sort of at the time it was still kind of regarded as running a bit too slow to be as impressive as it should have been. Why are none of these working? None of these boost pads are working. Oh, the joy of bugs. Or it may just be that collision detection thing again, where I look like I'm hitting them, but I'm actually not hitting them. I don't know. Anyway, nearly there. We're probably going to run out of time with the lack of boosts I've hit along the way. Yeah, there we go. We're out of time. Oh, there's the end as well. That's annoying. Out of time. Game over. Can we continue? I don't know. Let's put my name in first. Pete. There we go. Right. So these are the people responsible for this. I don't think I recognise any of those names. Jürgen Friedrich, mainly. Actually, vaguely remember his name. I can't remember why. But anyway, let's have one more go. Let's have a look at level 11, which is the labyrinth. So if we complete this level, we get a 100,000 point bonus. And you see, the interesting thing about this one is that it's got multiple routes. So you can take different ways to the finish line. So let's see what happens with this one. So at this point in the game, you stop getting tips on the startup screen as well. You just have to kind of get on with it. Yeah, so that's how the junctions work. So you just pick a side, And then off you go. So you might notice at this point you're starting to get aspects of the course that are deliberately trying to throw you off course. So there's sort of stars in places that will sort of take you off the optimal racing line. So you want to be careful for those. Let's go left again. Oh, we've got airborne enemies at this point as well, so you have to pull back on the stick to fire your lasers upwards to do that. Which is actually the opposite of what it tells you to do in the manual. Oh, jumps! Whee! Yeah, I remember always having trouble with these narrow bits. Just because it was quite difficult to sort of steer around them, because you don't have analog controls. And so you can't really sort of gently steer around them. You just have to sort of tap the joystick in the direction and hope you don't hit the wall too many times. It's that, or when you try it again, you pick a different route, I guess. Okay, we must get near the end now. Usually a long straight before the end. It's a very long straight. There's the end. Wonderful. 100,000 points for us. No shields left though, so no bonus for us. Alright, what's next? The coat hanger. Zoom through bends and tunnels. Okay. So, more junctions in this one. Let's try going right this time. So yeah, like I say, this is one of those games that even back when it first released, I kind of acknowledged that it wasn't really very good, but for some reason I enjoyed it regardless. And that's cool. I like it when you find a game like that you sort of... you feel like you resonate with it for some reason, despite it having issues, to put it mildly. But, I mean, for me, games that have had flaws that don't make it unplayable by any means, they kind of give it character. They make it interesting. They give you things to think about, and they give you interesting stories to tell, and that sort of thing. So, I don't know. I mean, that kind of informs a lot of my game playing habits today. I really enjoy... the games I enjoy the most these days are the ones that have either not had particularly good critical receptions or have been ignored completely. So, I guess kind of my feelings in that regard started out way back in the 16-bit era, maybe even the 8-bit era. Because I'm sure there are some games on the Atari 8-bit that got panned that I still found myself enjoying. I don't know. Ultimately, it shouldn't matter. You don't need anyone's approval to enjoy something. You should just play the things you enjoy. If you enjoy them, that's all that matters, really, isn't it? Doing a lot better on these levels than I was expecting to, I must confess. I was expecting to not be able to get off that first labyrinth level, but here we are. Right, bring on the next. Oh, didn't see what that was. My itchy trigger finger. That or the game not being able to keep up with my controls. More likely the latter. Yeah, scary flying thing. Do I imagine we have some more junctions in this one? I imagine we probably do. Because that seems to be the thing that happens in these later levels. Oh, half pipe. Hello. Whee! Yeah, these jumps are fun. So we haven't looked at hard driving on this series yet, but that was also a game that I liked very much back at the time. The Atari ST version of that actually ran a bit better than this did. And again, that was a game I liked because I've mentioned on this series before how I was fascinated with the idea of driving and this sort of romanticized view of driving I had in my mind. So hard driving was an especially fascinating game to me because it seemed to be a semi-realistic simulation of driving a car. Admittedly, a simulation of driving a car through physically impossible tracks. But if you stuck to the speed circuit, which I tended to do actually because the stunt circuit on hard driving I found incredibly difficult, especially with the mouse controls of the ST version. Yeah, that sort of fueled those fantasies a bit, so... And as I say, there is a link between this game and hard driving. The original arcade version was running on a variation of the hard driving hardware, so... But yeah, if you do get the chance to check out the arcade original, do, because it's cool. If you imagine this, but running at a much more playable frame rate, including things like gore-railed shading and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's a nice looking game still. And if you have access to an Atari Lynx as well, that version's well worth playing too. Particularly because, as with a lot of 3D looking Lynx games, it was actually just making clever use of sprites rather than actual polygons. McNamara's Revenge. Deranged drones everywhere. Enter at your own risk. This looks complex. Okay. Well. Fair enough. Let's see how we get on with this one. So the drones are those indestructible ones, I think. Let's go... Oh, risky. Oh, slowing to a crawl. A measly 100 miles an hour. I find it quite interesting that there are 8-bit ports of this. Which is, you might think, an incredibly ambitious thing to do, but it kind of followed a pattern for a lot of 8-bit ports of games like this, which is that rather than trying to just port the arcade version, as this is doing, they just completely rebuilt it. They completely restructured it, made it work in a way that was more practical on that hardware. So if you look at the Commodore 64 and the Spectrum and the Amstrad CPC versions of this, the Spectrum version in particular is done almost entirely through cycling colours to simulate the effect of these tunnels. There's no actual polygons or anything going on. It's just purely colour cycling. The Commodore 64 and the Amstrad versions look a bit more convincingly like this, but again, it's still not using true 3D graphics like this one. It's still using sprites and sort of variations on the converging lines used in Vanishing Point horizon chasing races. I feel like we're probably not going to make it this time. I've hit those walls a few too many times, I think. Oh no, we have made it. It's quite generous with the time limits on these later levels, which is good, I guess. Well, let's see how far we can get. Next level is a challenge level, I believe. The kill challenge. Destroy as many vehicles as possible. You are on. So the top number of kills we've had on this one is 70. So I'm guessing there's going to be plenty of targets to shoot down along the way. Oh, God, yeah. So many targets is making the frame rate crawl even more. Up to 20. Still 1 minute 40 to go. I don't think you actually have to beat the target to win a challenge level. I think it's still just a case of getting to the end before time runs out. But I don't know. I like the additional focus on another objective. It just makes things a little bit more interesting. Even if, as we're seeing here, the engine isn't really up to having this many enemies on screen. I always find it interesting how, like, it just didn't bother to show you lasers actually flying down the track in this. It just showed you when they were firing, and you just had to sort of imagine them going down the track yourself. In the original arcade version, the frame rate was high enough that you could actually see your lasers firing down the track, which made it a little bit easier to judge things like sort of shooting down those airborne enemies and that kind of thing. But I mean, again, here it's a case of, yes, it's a bit crap, but it works. So I can't be too mad. And when you consider that here in the UK, arcades were not a widespread thing like they were or are in some cases in America. For us, getting to an arcade tended to be sort of something that went alongside going on holiday. So like if we went to the seaside, to the beach, that's the only time that we'd be able to get to play arcade games. And so this is what we had. So like when there were new arcade games out, the best we could do was playing these home ports of them. And so you kind of learn to make do. Which I think was probably good for me in the long run. Because it's made me very tolerant of things that people get very impatient with these days. Like these days, you just have to look at a Steam review of a game that dares to drop below 60 frames a second sometimes. Or doesn't support the latest ultra-wide monitors, or doesn't run on Linux or whatever. It's like, I just want to say to these people, it's like, you know, there was a time when you just had to deal with what you were given. And yes, it's much easier for developers to sort of distribute patches and things these days to make things work better, but I don't know, I feel there's still some sort of value to settling for something that isn't perfect. Learning to enjoy things that aren't perfect. Because that way, in the long run, you can have a lot more enjoyment out of things. So you can waste a lot less of your time being angry about frame rates on the internet or whatever. And a lot more time just enjoying stuff. Like, if I was really pissed off at the frame rate of this game, I wouldn't still be sitting here playing it now. But I'm here. I'm actually quite invested in this playthrough of it at this point. Even though I mock the frame rate and the graphics and its various little idiosyncrasies along the way, as I sit here and play this, I can't help but realise I'm actually having a good time. Alright. Oh, we got a shockwave. Let's actually try and fire that off in the next level and see if it actually works. So, in theory, we should be able to either push forward and back and fire off a shockwave. Let's wait for some enemies to be around. Or press the space bar. One of those two. So, forward and back. Doesn't work. And spacebar doesn't work. Okay, so the shockwave in this game just doesn't work. Yeah, I don't know what happened with that. I guess they either didn't program it in right or just forgot. I don't know. It's not like it's an essential mechanic or anything like that. It just makes things a little bit easier in a few places. Like, shockwaves are the only way you can destroy those metallic drones, for example. So if they're really getting in your way, then firing off a shockwave will allow you to clear the path of them, which can be quite useful. But again, not the end of the world. As you can see, we're getting through just fine without it at the minute. So we're actually not that many levels off the ultimate challenge at the minute. So maybe that is the secret for this game. You start on the labyrinth and just go from there instead and see how far you can get. And screw the earlier levels because they're just there to teach you how the game plays. I don't know. It's interesting with relatively early games to look at how they approach things like game balance and so on, because sometimes they just didn't. Sometimes you just play something and you wonder if anyone ever actually play tested it, because there are sequences that just appear to be completely impossible to complete by a normal human being. I don't know, in the case of arcade games, you've got the aspect of wanting to keep people pumping credits into it and that sort of thing, but you know, there's a line. Particularly when it comes to home ports, where you don't need to encourage people to keep putting money in because they've already spent £24.99 on the game or whatever. Right, coming up, level 18. Robot Hell. Shoot first and ask questions later. 5 levels to the ultimate challenge. Are we going to make it? Probably not, but we'll see. It's a deceptively quiet start. What I think I do kind of wish this game had is some sort of like map or progress meter showing you how far through the level you are. But then I guess it's something that with repeated plays you'd learn the layouts of the levels and get a feel for what happened when and the things you'd need to watch out for and that kind of thing. Yeah, this is deceptively easy, this one. It doesn't seem to be an awful lot going on, apart from dodgy collision detection, because I clearly hit that boost pad. But never mind. Maybe they put this one in to give you a bit of a breather after some of the earlier levels. Or maybe it's just poorly balanced, like I said. You never can tell with these early games. Ten seconds to go. This looks like it might be the end. Yep, there we are. There's the end. Ooh, close. Should have hit the boosts. But it's okay. Satan's Salom. Devilishly wicked. Alright, let's see what we've got here then. I guess this is going to be a sort of wiggly course. Or maybe it's just going to like alternate the stars on the sides or something. Yeah, one of the most difficult structures I find to deal with in this game is when the tunnel quickly swaps from one direction to the other. I'm not sure if there's a way you can actually do that without losing some speed. Missed. Right here, you quickly whiz around. Oh, well, I did it that time. Okay, so it is possible. You just got to time it right. But there, yeah, that was poor, for example. There we are. Now we're into the slalom bit. And the narrow bits I hate so much. Stay off the walls. I think this one might be the end of us, maybe. I'm aware I've said that before and we still managed to get through it, but... yeah, I guess that last level was to lull us into a bit of a false sense of security before this one came along. Oh no, we've done it with 10 seconds to spare. I stand corrected. Gonna beat the game at this rate. I missed the map again. Oh well. I guess we'll take it as it comes. There we go, actually hit a boost pad for once. Yeah, kudos to you if you've stuck with me through this playthrough, by the way. Because I'm aware that it may not be the most interesting game to watch, but like I say, I'm finding myself weirdly invested in it now that I'm doing probably better in this than I was ever able to as a kid. But I mean, that's a bit of a running pattern for this series, isn't it? I'm seeing all sorts of things that I never saw when I was a youngster. Simply because I didn't have the skills or the knowledge to be able to play those games to their full potential back then. Whereas now I understand a lot more about game design, game history, where these games came from, what they were trying to do. And I mean, there's not a ton to understand here, so in this one it literally is just a case of being a little bit more skilled with the game, and also having a better idea of how to compensate for things like the frame rate and the collision detection and that sort of thing. Except these narrow bits, still don't like the narrow bits. Another successful level. So, only 4 more to go into the ultimate challenge, I think. Oh, 2 more. 2 to the ultimate challenge. Figure 8. Figure this one out. It looks pretty straightforward to me. I know they were just going for a joke on the word figure, but it wasn't very funny, so... This is where the last level before the ultimate challenge is literally impossible to complete, isn't it? Oh, chug, chug, chug. Yeah, you're at the point where you can probably count the frames per second by eye. Poor little ST, it's doing its best. Well, it's not, but... as I say, it's doing its best under the circumstances. Oh, a narrow bit. You know how I feel about these. I guess we're going around the one of the figure 80 bits at this point. Ooh, boost. Missed. Actually did miss it last time. So I'll accept that one. Ten seconds. We're gonna make it? Just about. Always 0.8. Alright, one more level until the ultimate challenge. Let's see if we can pull this off. The jigsaw. Cut a path to the finish. Next level is the ultimate challenge. Okay. That doesn't look like it's got junctions or anything, so I guess we just go for it. Well, here we go. 1 minute 41 seconds is our time limit. I wonder if there's going to be a lot of enemies on this one or something like that. And the high score on kills is only 25. That's not massive. Boost pad. Boost pad. Missed that one. Does look like there's quite a few boost pads on this one from the sound of things, judging by that high score listing. I really like this low resolution, low poly look. I know that sort of low poly is coming back into vogue these days, but it's sort of combined with high resolution, and that's a very distinct look to what we've got here. So like combining a low resolution screen with low polygon counts, that's an aesthetic that I really like. Probably primarily for nostalgic reasons, but simply because I associate it with a happy period of my life, good memories, that sort of thing, which is important. I don't know, there's just something special about that look and feel that is never quite captured with modern low poly efforts. So like, if this got a port today and this was in high resolution, it probably wouldn't be nearly as nostalgic for me as this version is. Oh my god, we made it! We are at the ultimate challenge, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see how far we can get then. The ultimate challenge! You've made it to the big time. It's time to prove how good you are. Sorry, the ultimate challenge. You couldn't spell it right on the last bloody level. Alright, here we go. So from what I understand, this just keeps going. I don't know if you like do laps of it and just continually work your way around it or whatever, but I don't know. That map certainly looks like that there was an end to it, and there's definitely a time limit, so I don't know. Maybe you can finish it. We'll see, I guess. It's a very long one, though. We've got 3 minutes to complete this one. Or 3 minutes to get as far as we can, I guess. If it really is endless. See, now that pickup there, that should be a shockwave, so I should... Nope, I still can't use it. Nope. No, they really don't work. Oh well. As I say, it's not as if we've needed them up until this point, so... Oh, missed. You gotta sort of be in position before they... before you hit them, basically. And even then, it doesn't always work. Go on, get it. Missed. Again, though, I clearly went over that. Ah, well, doesn't matter. Again, I was in position well in advance that time. Oh, this is unpleasant. Wiggly wiggly. And a narrow bit because I love those. Of course, the one advantage of the dodgy collision detection is apparently that you can just breeze past those drones on narrow bits like this. I will take it. I'm not going to complain. Just a minute to go. Out of the way! Oh, I hit one, finally. It is possible to hit them sometimes. There's another one. Can we get that one? Yes, we got that one and that one. Oh, now we're flying. "20 seconds to go. Is there an end to this? Or maybe it's just that the track... Maybe there is an end to it, but the track is just so unfeasibly long that no one could ever possibly reach it. I don't know. There we go, we're out of time. Better luck next time. Alright, well, that was Stun Runner. That's the most amount of that game I've ever seen. And still somehow I don't have the top score, which seems a little unreasonable, but oh well, never mind. Anyway, yeah, I enjoyed that. Like I say, it may not be the most technically impressive game you'll ever see on the Atari ST or anything like that, but well, there we go. Stun Runner. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. New episodes of Atari A to Z are on Tuesdays and Atari ST A to Z on Thursdays. Check out atariatoz.wordpress.com for a full archive. Do please also check out my other projects moegamer.net, where I explore Japanese and Japanese-inspired games from yesterday and today, and videopackgames.wordpress.com, which aims to catalogue the small but well-formed library of the Philips G7000 Videopack computer, also known as the Magnavox Odyssey 2. You can also support my work on Patreon or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.